We work directly with the teachers and the administration. So a school will reach out to us and say, our teachers are finding a lot of this kind of behavior and they'd like capacity building in how to better manage it so that the teachers are, their skill sets are expanded with the social, emotional, and mental health needs of the student.
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by WriteForMe, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome back for another episode of Business Ninjas. I'm here today with Brooke Borg. She's the Director of Professional Development at Counseling in Schools. Brooke, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you. So Brooke, why don't you start and tell me a little bit about yourself?
So as you said, I'm the Director of Professional Development at Counseling in Schools, which we will get into what Counseling in Schools does. I arrived at Counseling in Schools after I'm from New York, but I lived abroad for many years, and I've been in New York for a little over a decade, been back in New York for a little over a decade. And I have been working in many nonprofits as a teaching artist. My background is in fine arts and art production. And so the projects I ended up doing early on in my career had to do with using the arts to acquire language, to learn. I would do these interactive art projects where people would, tell personal stories, and then we would end up creating things together. And that led to doing a lot of education work. The education work and the use of the arts opened up my work to students with various needs who benefited from various strategies. And then when I came back to New York, and started working for nonprofits, that was a very smooth transition. And so with enough project management and curriculum development in those areas, I ended up at Counseling in Schools as the Director of Professional Development.
That's such a unique journey and so interesting, kind of taking all of the skills that you have, and I imagine you apply those to your job now. So tell me a little bit more about what Counseling in Schools is.
So Counseling in Schools has been a New York City not-for-profit for over 35 years. I know our executive director has been there for 30 years and in various roles. So what Counseling in Schools does, very simply, is it partners with New York City public schools and private schools as well, but really DOE, mostly Title I schools, and places a mental health counselor in various disciplines based on the need in schools. So essentially, if there's an art therapist working at the school, a clinical social worker, mental health counselor, whatever the discipline is, they're working at the school as part of the school community, but they work for Counseling in Schools as part of this very special, unique nonprofit.
That's fantastic. So talk to me a little bit about the different work, because you mentioned, having, maybe creative art therapy. What other sorts of services are there?
So my role as Director of Professional Development is, I am not a counselor, obviously. And my team work with the teachers and the administration and the school support staff. So while the counselors are at school working individually with the students, their families, and sometimes in groups. And also, occasionally they'll move into professional development by doing a presentation in a staff meeting, or doing what's called push-ins by going into classrooms at a teacher's request and doing something based on, their area of expertise. We work directly with the teachers and the administration. So a school will reach out to us and say, our teachers are finding a lot of this kind of behavior and they'd like capacity building in how to better manage it, or, or it could be a school where we have a counselor already and they realize that, it would be great to have a professional development facilitator in concert with whatever they're also doing with the students, so that the teachers are their skill sets are expanded with the social, emotional, and mental health needs of the student.
Do you see a lot of, so I used to be a school social worker. I think I might have mentioned that to you before. So a lot of the professional development that you do, is it primarily around, social emotional learning? Is it around, helping with classroom management for some behaviors, like interventions? Talk to me what you see the most professional development in.
So it is a range. I'm very, very happy that over the last 3 years of working with counseling in schools, I've assembled an incredible team. It's very multidisciplinary, and it is based on the needs that have been presented to us. So like I said, a school will reach out and say, this is what we're seeing. And then myself, the executive director, or, a member of my team will go to the school or meet, and we'll do what's called a needs assessment. And, we'll get into detail. And of course, what a principal or a school social worker sees as the need might be different than what the teachers themselves see as the need. And so we try to really assess that nuance. And so to answer your question, the needs are varied and they go in sort of trends. So during and immediately after COVID, of course, what people needed was grief counseling, and also, sort of the self-management or self-care practices to even approach such a heavy topic with a student who might have lost caregivers or people during COVID, because of course teachers were also reeling from the general grief. That still and will always remain a need. Unfortunately, I say that with a smile. I know it's a little odd, but it's just the world we live in. And now, of course, in New York City, there is a wave of asylum seekers. And so we are being asked to, provide capacity building in how do you even, broach a topic of XYZ with a young child who, based on their age and development, might not have the vocabulary and language to express themselves and what they've been through, and quite literally are learning a third or fourth language right now in a new environment. So, right now we're in the process of building out that team of crisis and immigration specialists. So there's no one thing. My background, obviously, or maybe not obviously, but based on my arts and, like social practice, my area of expertise is social emotional learning and arts integration. And clearly we get requests for a broad range. So my staff consists of art therapists, social workers, administrators, and public health administrators who have dealt with, crisis in the community, juvenile justice, and things like that.
That's really interesting. So it sounds like you're able to pull kind of for all the best pieces and in order to, incorporate this really great team. Do you think that, being able to have people on the ground level, kind of in the trenches at the school level, and then also have people like you in your roles with your expertise team around you, surrounding you to continue to grow that professional development, do you think that's one of the reasons that counseling in schools is really able to stand out from its competition?
I think so. And I don't know, I think that the way that we might frame it is that we work with other community-based organizations. We really welcome the chance to work with any community-based organization that provides social emotional support or mental health support, immigration rights support. In fact, right now, I'm sort of overseeing an initiative that, myself and other members of leadership have put together for professional development for our own staff in other organizations that provide these different public services. I think that what does make us stand out is that level of multi-tiered support. Every counselor who is at a school has a clinical supervisor with whom they could go over their caseloads with. They have a program manager who deals with sort of the on the ground logistics of, a contractual agreement with the Department of Education. And then everyone also has a program officer that also deals with those logistical contractual as well as clinical issues that might come up. And then my role, I do believe that when we do professional development at a school where we already have a counseling presence, or we already have like after school enrichment or things like that, it does boost the general, it does create a learning environment where the teachers are already aware of what we do. They're already aware of what our counselors do. Maybe they're not aware of like the intricacies of their caseloads, but they understand that there is a need. Sometimes when my team and I go into a school where we don't necessarily have a counseling presence, there's a little bit of a grace period where, not that teachers and school staff don't understand that there is a need, but they're professionals, they're veterans in, oftentimes they know what they're doing, they know what works. And so we tread lightly so that we're not like coming in saying, oh, we're going to tell you how to do your job. No, not at all. We really come at it, like I said, in partnership. Like, what are you doing that's already working? How can we build that out?
I think that's really great and super important to have those conversations. And like you said, walking into a school where you don't necessarily have the presence already, just like, the students, adults too, they need to trust you before they learn from you. So having that trust and building that, that foundation is so important. I imagine that makes the work a lot better too, for that when, teachers are able to look to either the counselors in the schools, look to, you for professional development, saying, hey, I know so-and-so, I like them, I trust them, you should go talk to them. It just makes the referral from the teacher to the student a lot easier too, I imagine.
Yes. And that's, going back to your question of what are you seeing the most of, I think that just general like relationship building, a conversation starter, sort of like staying in the conversation, building a support network, that shows up in no matter what workshop we do. If it's teaching and counseling students with autism spectrum disorder, building ways to build that trust, ways to get a referral, ways to work with the counselor. If it's grief, if it's asylum seeking, if it's students in temporary housing, again, it's, initiating that conversation, staying in it, realizing that you don't have to do everything. If you're a teacher, you're not a counselor, it's not your responsibility, but working in a team.
So what would you say the most significant misconception people have about the industry, or the field rather, about, whether it be counseling in schools, about mental health? Do you often hear a lot of common misconceptions?
I would say that right now we are facing a public health crisis of teen suicide or teen suicidal ideation. And I think that the misconceptions are very understandable when we go in and we, try to train or at least inform school staff on suicidal ideation and suicide. What I often hear is fear of having the conversation, fear of starting the conversation with a student. I myself, from working in nonprofits, like a long time ago, I understand that, you hear the phrase kill myself or suicide from someone and you think, oh my God, a student cannot, God forbid, a student cannot die on my watch. You tell somebody with a mental health degree, or you tell the dean, and you make sure that people know, and it's scary. And oftentimes when you're not staying in the conversation with that student, it feels like a breach of trust. And what we try to do is, assure the teachers that talking about it in most cases, as has been shown in studies and evidence-based assessment tools, talking about it, staying in the conversation with the student likely conveys the message that they are not alone, that this is not abnormal, that it is nothing to be, I'll speak for myself, my initial reaction as an educator hearing that was panic and immediacy and urgency. Understandable. And I have some examples where, like I said, I never saw the student again after I, seemingly to them breached their trust. So I think a common misconception, not necessarily about the industry or counseling in schools or mental health, I don't know if I would speak to that. What I have found is this particular issue, a common misconception is that if school staff speaks about it, they're going to give students an idea, they're going to nurture an idea, they're going to be responsible, God forbid, if anything happens. When studies and, just people's experiences on the ground have found that that's not necessarily true, that it might be the opposite, actually. So, again, that's a topic that we tread lightly because we can't control people, and we are in the midst of an epidemic, and, we don't want to tell caring, experienced, fearful teachers, oh no, you're wrong, just go ahead. So that is, that's a topic where I found some misconceptions.
Yeah. And it's, there certainly is an epidemic of youth suicide in, not only, it sounds like New York, but, nationwide. And I recall a statistic, don't quote me on this, but I know that there was a study that said it was around 20% of high school students reported serious suicidal ideations. And, like you said, I think it is a very common misconception that it's something scary to talk about because you're dealing with life or death, right? And when you become a teacher, you want to teach. And, I think that sometimes you don't necessarily, and I don't want to speak, for everybody, but just saying, you don't necessarily think that so much of your job is dealing, outside of the curriculum. So much of a teacher's job is done outside the curriculum.
Yes. And, that is even more true today we're still in COVID, but, and, I really feel for teachers, and there are a lot of people on my team that are retired Department of Education teachers and principals. And so they've, I've been in front of a class of 30 kids, but they've been in front of a class of 30 kids for 30 years, from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m., 5 days a week,
Yeah.
So they really, really get it. And so, like I said, we don't tread lightly, but we try to tread in partnership and say, like, I hear you, you know what you're doing. And we have these strategies and practices based on our 35 years of experience in the mental health field. How can we combine them and, make a great learning environment and build even better relationships with the students? And again, I would also say that in what I do, if you find a teacher or a school staff person that's like, this is not my area, I want to talk about chemistry, I don't want to get in deep, it's like, fine, that's your personality, that's your area. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you some check-in tools and let you know that if you see X, Y, and Z, it's time to say, hey kid, I've noticed this. I'm going to refer you to this person. And you don't have to get deep, but there is a social emotional element to teaching. You said so much of their work is outside of the curriculum. We need to integrate just a little bit more, you don't have to get deep, you don't have to get messy, you don't have to get really into it, but it is part of the job.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the great things about, it sounds like having an entire department dedicated to professional development, talking about, whether it be, because I looked online, I know that you guys are, a restorative practices. I was a restorative practice trainer, so I'm very familiar with that. Back in the day. So, giving restorative tools like that, just reframing conversations, not getting deep, just reframing a conversation. So Brooke, if people wanted to learn more, about the services that Counseling in Schools offers, kind of more about the programs, where would they go to learn more?
All right. So we have, of course, our website, counselinginschools.org, one word, not case sensitive. So just all lowercase, counselinginschools.org. And then as an additional resource, we have Partners in Healing. So Partners in Healing is a separate website. You could also find it on counselingandschools.org, and I'll share it with you so that you could. It's long, so and Partners in Healing is really it's really a presentation of my department, of the profession, it's a mental health and social emotional and strengths-based practice website for the non-clinician and even for the non-teacher. It's for caregivers and teachers. There's downloadable resources on it in like what's an activity corner where you could get like tip sheets, worksheets, charts, little activities. We created it during COVID. So it was a lot of like learning at home, SEL at home, little art projects, art therapy directives, and it has information on trauma. It has information on social emotional learning and information on building strength and capacity. And it really is, when people reach out to me for professional development work, I send them to Partners in Healing because it's got a lot of information with a lot of nuance. And then from there, we can go even deeper with your specific school community. So I would say that could go to counselingandschools.org for information about our counseling programs, our after school programs, the kind of support that we could provide in a school. And then Partners in Healing gives you even more information on that.
That's fantastic. I love that you're able to do kind of the work in person, but you're also giving people the tools, outside of the schoolwork to be able to take that, everything that they're learning and expand on those skills and really, really meet the needs of parents and families. Well, Brooke, this has been a great conversation. Before we head out, is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with, either about counseling in schools, about the field, mental health, anything in general, or art, anything you want to leave our listeners with?
Whew. Well, thank you so much for having me, firstly. I would say that we're moving into an era where people are becoming more, more literate, more expressive about mental health. And, I would just encourage that. Since you did restorative practices, I'll just leave with a quote that we use in restorative practice trainings. That's like, the ambition, the aspiration that we try to live by. We can't always do it, but it's, I listen to understand and not respond. Mm-hmm. We often want to jump in and give a kid advice and be like, oh, well, I know, now when I have a conversation, I don't always succeed. I try to just listen and take a beat after the sentence is done. And I think that is the first stepping stone to really good relationships.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think that, certainly teaching kids that is, important to teach them that, but also as adults too, outside of everything,
yes.
Sometimes even more. Well, Brooke, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you walking me through counseling in schools, just a really great open and honest dialogue. I appreciate you being on Business Ninjas today.
Thank you so much for reaching out and having me. It's been a pleasure.